Welcome to the Martin Bailey Photography Podcast. It's May 23, 2018, and this is episode 620. I'm often asked how I get so much done, so this week I'm going to share some information about some of the tools that I use daily to speed up my work. We should preface this by mentioning that I get a lot done because I work hard. I actually think I'm working a little too hard, as I hate to just sit around. Relaxing to me is not very, relaxing. I don't work every moment of the day, of course, and I do enjoy making time to practice playing the piano or learn new skills. But there is always something to be done to help me get ahead in my business, and I tend to go back to these tasks quickly and perhaps a little too often. That aside though, let's talk about some of the apps that I use to speed up the tasks that I do. My motivation to look for these apps generally starts with an action or task that I need to repeat. As I've mentioned in the past, in my photography workflow, if there is anything that needs to be done more than once, I create a preset for it. For example, Capture One Pro automatically creates the directory structure to drop my images into on import. There's a preset to help me with renaming my files on import too. Whenever I lay out a new paper size to print on, or different margin settings, I save a new preset. Luckily, our photography-related software has the ability to create presets built in, but there are many other tasks that we repeat daily on the computer that are not easily automated without some extra tools, and it's some of these tools that I'd like to talk about today. Depending on what you do for a living, you might find that you end up typing out similar text again and again. For example, I run around 5 photography tours each year, with between 10 and 14 participants on each tour. I've been running tours since 2008, and I quickly found myself writing out the welcome email that I send to people when they book quite often. I initially used to keep a draft of the email for each tour in the drafts folder in my mail application, but at some point I moved to a different app that didn't allow me to copy these drafts. So I looked for an alternative and found TextExpander. TextExpander has grown over the years and really is an integral part of much of what I do. Its minimal work case is to create a simple shortcut that expands out into longer text when you type. The first snippet I created monitors my typing for the 4 letters RGDS, followed by a space, which expands out to Regards, Martin, with a carriage return between the 2 words. This, of course, is a simple footer that I use when sending an email. Another snippet that I probably use hundreds of times a week expands the 4 letters MBPM to my email address, and I have lots of other snippets for static words and phrases that I use a lot. TextExpander really comes into its own when you start creating more complicated snippets. For example, when I need to start creating a new post for the podcast, there is a page of code that I always use as a base. I used to keep this in Evernote, which is a good step, but I realized that I can even save the time required to open Evernote and locate my blog post template by simply defining a shortcode in TextExpander that fills the post with my template code. For this, I use the word NEWEP, NEWEP, as this is not something that I'm likely to type by accident. At first, I was just adding the static code, really just taking Evernote out of the loop. Then I realized that because TextExpander allows you to define what it calls fill-ins, I could create a snippet that would basically ask me what episode I was creating and then use the number that I typed in just the once to populate all of the places in the text that I used this number. I've circled these 3 places in red in this screenshot that I've put on the blog. And remember, if you can't see the images on your device, then go over to the blog at mbp.ac/620 and you can follow along there. It's only 3 places, but it saves me the time to locate each number and to change it in these 3 places that I could also potentially type wrongly. If we go back to my original example though, with my need to send welcome emails to my tour participants, I initially had just text snippets for each tour. I would go to the text expander pull down and select the email subject, then move the cursor to the mail body and select the snippet for the body. Each was different, and because I ran the same tour every year in most cases, I had anything up to 20 to 30 different snippets to cover the subject and body of all of my tours. Then recently I realized that I could remove all of these and have just one smart snippet that would take care of all of my tour welcome email. That not only saves me time typing these out, but also saves me the time required to manage all of these copies. Say if I want to change how I word something, I'd have to go in and copy and paste my change in lots of different snippets. Here's what I did. I created a snippet with the shortcode TWE for Tour Welcome Email. Keep in mind that, according to my settings, I have to type a space after these 3 characters to expand the snippet, so typing the word 12 or 20 isn't going to trigger the snippet. I'm not going to go into detail on how to actually create these dynamic snippets, as the makers of Text Expander have a whole host of videos to help with that. But I did make a brief animated GIF image to show you how smoothly these dynamic snippets work. See how I just type my shortcut, then enter the year, select the tour name from a pull down, and enter the participant's name, and this information is used multiple times throughout the email. Also, when more than one person books at the same time, I have to ask for multiple copies of our tour participant form to be filled out. I've also added the snippet fill top, which is a special snippet to add all of the questions that you're asked in a dynamic form at the top of the form so that you can easily find them and answer them. This saves me from going through the form looking for dynamic fields. Note too that although I start the form in the email subject line, I added the code key:\tab, which is basically simulating me pressing the tab key, and that moves the cursor down to the body of the email before expanding the rest of the text. This is relatively simple stuff, but taking a few minutes to create these simple dynamic emails saves a whole lot of time that I would otherwise spend maintaining lots of templates and then locating them each time I want to use them. I mean, what could be easier than typing 3 letters? Text Expander works on both Mac OS and Windows, and although I don't use it a lot, they also have an iOS app that works really well. All snippets that you create are synced across your devices, and the iOS app adds a keyboard so that you can easily retrieve your snippets directly into whatever app you're using. If you find this interesting, you can find Text Expander at textexpander.com. It's a subscription-based product costing just $3.33 per month billed annually, and I wouldn't like to be without it. This post isn't sponsored in any way. I'm just telling you about products that I love and use daily. Moving on, Sometimes it's not obvious that a piece of text that you copy to your clipboard is going to be needed again. But I used to get frustrated when I'd be working and find myself needing the text that I had on my clipboard a while ago, but since overwrote it with a new clipping. Many years ago, I tried an application that would assign numbers to clips so that I could retrieve them with multiple keyboard shortcuts, but I found it complicated to use because it was never obvious which clip was under which shortcut. Then, a few years ago, I found an application called Copied, and it changed the way I think about my computer's clipboard. In its simplest form, Copied simply keeps the text that you copy to your clipboard in a long list. I forget what the default number is, maybe 100, but I have clipboard set to save my last 250 clippings, and I found that I reuse my clippings time and time again each day. The beauty of Copied is that you don't have to remember any numbers or shortcuts. You just go to the menu and click on the icon, and you just get a list of your clippings, so you can visually look for what you need to reuse. If you can remember one word in the clipping that you need to retrieve, you can just search for it. For example, if I search for the acronym GDPR, I can see a list of related clippings from the last few days as I've been finalizing our GDPR strategy. Another great feature is Copied lists. You can create a list and add clippings that will be stored permanently for things that you know you'll use again and again. I have a number of PHP code clippings in one list, and I have another list for my short links like the various lenses on B&H, for example, as I retrieve these links quite a lot. Copied also has iCloud Sync, so I can view clippings from all of my computers and ISO devices from any device. This is great because I can, for example, just copy the address of a web page that I was looking at on my iPad and then jump to that page moments later from Copied when I'm over on my iMac. I sometimes also use Apple's handoff feature, which offers me a browser with the page I was looking at on the device sometimes, but it doesn't always pick up on what I was doing. So Copied is a great way of working between devices for both links and for, of course, all of the clippings that I make pretty much continuously through my working day. Copied is available on the Mac App Store, currently for $7.99, and unfortunately I don't think it's available for Windows, but there is an iOS version, as I mentioned. The third app that I wanted to talk about is one that I've just started using but finding very useful is a great little utility called Unclutter. I don't like to have too many files on my computer desktop. When I'm working on something like a new podcast episode, I might be capturing screenshots or saving images that I'll embed in the post, like today. And as I do this, I often find myself just dropping these images onto the desktop, then saving them to a folder to stay organized. But once I've completed that episode, I like to file them away. Another thing that I find myself doing is grabbing screenshots of things that I want to talk about in future episodes. And these also generally start off on my desktop. But as soon as I see more than a handful of these things, it starts to bother me. If I get to 2 or 3 columns of icons on my desktop, it starts to drive me positively crazy. But if I move these things completely away from the desktop, they're easily forgotten about. Unclutter is, again, a relatively simple idea, but it's been designed and implemented really well. Once installed, all you need to do to access it is to move your mouse to the top of the screen and then scroll down. This reveals 3 columns, each with different functionality, as I'll explain. It's kind of difficult to see how Unclutter reveals itself in a screenshot, so I created a quick 30-second video to show you. Again, that's over on the blog at mbp.ac/620 if you're not already there. Having just discussed copied, the leftmost column in Unclutter may seem a little redundant, as it's essentially the same idea. It's a list of saved clipboard clippings that you can scroll through and click on to retrieve at any time. A nice feature is that when you mouse over a clipping, the icon changes to a star, which favorites the clipping when you click on it. Then, if you click the star at the top right of the clippings column, you get a list of just your favorite clippings. Right now, I'm using Copied more than Unclutter for this feature, but I'm leaving it turned on for now to see if I start to gravitate towards Unclutter for at least some of the clippings that it holds for me. One limiting factor would be that the most clippings that you can save in Unclutter is 50. And believe it or not, you can set Copied to save up to 1,000 clippings. I sometimes have Copied set to save the last 500 clippings, and I've never set it lower than 250. And I do sometimes look through the entire list for something. The right column in Unclutter is a simple memo pad. You can create text memos and recall them easily from a list. You just type them in right there in the app, and it's very simple and good for some things. I find myself making short-term notes to myself up there, although my long-term notes are still going into Evernote, which I love and probably won't give up easily. Finally though, the main reason I have started using Unclutter is that center column. I love being able to just drag a file or folder to the top of my screen, causing Unclutter to open up, and then just dropping that file straight into that collapsing space. You can create folders to further organize this area, and I'm finding this really helps to keep my desktop, uncluttered. In the preferences, we can configure the actual folder that is used to be inside Dropbox. So whatever I put into this folder or subfolders that I have created will automatically be synchronized to my other computers and available via Dropbox on my iOS devices. I'm finding myself dropping in screenshots for future podcasts, apps that I want to install on my other Macs, and even things like backups of databases, which are only relevant for a few days before they become old. If I file these away completely, they just get forgotten until a major clean out. But I'm reorganizing this area every few days at the moment, so I can easily remove stale data quickly. Being able to get at working files quickly without having to search through scores of icons on a cluttered desktop certainly helps to improve efficiency, and I really just don't like to work on a messy computer. So I'm really pleased that I received an email about Unclutter last weekend. I learned a thing or two about marketing from the email too, with a photo of the developer and his brother somehow making me want to just throw money at them before I'd even finished my breakfast. You can drag any of these 3 spaces in Unclutter out and undock them and leave them on your desktop or drag them around to reorder them. Ultimately, I think I'll probably end up just using the collapsible files section, but it's still worth it to me. It feels like I have a big drawer under my physical desk surface that I can just slide open and drop stuff into to get off of my work surface. You can buy Unclutter either directly from the Unclutter website or from the Mac App Store, and I've made these words links in the text, and they're in the show notes for this week on the blog. Anyway, we'll wrap it up there for today. As I mentioned earlier, none of these recommendations are sponsored. I'm just sharing information about 3 applications that save me time and help me get a lot done. There are others, of course, and I'll follow up about them in due course. For now, if you haven't heard of these apps and find them useful, that's great. Also, if you have any apps that help to make your work more efficient, do share a link in the comments on the blog at mbp.ac/620. I'd love to hear what you're using. Thanks very much for listening today. If you enjoy this podcast, please share a link with your friends. Subscribe in iTunes or your favorite podcast program to ensure uninterrupted delivery. If you have a moment to rate the podcast or leave us a review in iTunes, that helps to keep us relevant in the huge number of podcasts out there now. You can find me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, etc. And links to everything that I'm up to are at martinbaileyphotography.com, so do drop by and take a look. With me leaving to start this year's Namibia tour and workshop in a few days, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to create any more episodes before I leave. So you may not hear from me for the next couple of weeks, but I'll be back in the middle of June to share our antics as we roam around that beautiful southwestern corner of Africa. In the meantime, you take care and have a great couple of weeks, whatever you're doing. Bye bye.